Okay, so we're going through the invalidators of wudu. So those things which break wudu. And I said the Hanafis, which is obviously the dominant madhab and the greatest madhab in the world, for anyone that thinks different. Okay, so the Hanafis, in terms of what breaks wudu, we have two things. So two principles. As long as you know them, you can find out, you'll know everything else that breaks wudu. Principle number one. Principle number one. For what breaks wudu? Ignore the slides. It's irrelevant. Okay. Yes, anything exiting the private parts. Yeah, anything exiting the private parts. That covers going to a toilet, number one, number two. It covers passing wind. Yeah. What's the second principle?
Impurities flowing out the body.
Good. Impurities flowing out of the body. That's flowing blood, flowing pus. That's vomiting, but there's a slight detail in vomiting. It has to be a mouthful. For it to break wudu, it has to be a mouthful.
Like crying.
No, tears aren't an impurity. No. Yeah, that's why it's strictly impurities flowing out of the body. Tears aren't an impurity.
And saliva is pure.
Saliva is pure. Yeah. Okay, so these are the two principles that break wudu. So from this, we understood last week. Does smoking break wudu? No. Does swearing break wudu? Does cutting nails break wudu?
No.
Does getting a haircut break wudu?
No.
Does watching TV break wudu?
No.
No. Does attending a funeral break wudu?
No.
Yeah. The reason is even today I had someone. His parents forced him to do wudu after he comes back from school because most likely he's been swearing at school. And he's like, I have wudu, I don't need to do it. Salah time's running out. I need to pray. No, you probably swore in school. You need to redo wudu. Literally today someone said. Yeah, so
that's the other principle, that certainty is not broken by doubt as well. So if you're sure that he swore, you're not sure you swore.
But yeah. So all of these things they do not break wudu. Anything coming out of the private parts, any impurity flowing out of the body. And the Hanafis that had one exception, an additional thing that breaks wudu. This is only to do with the Hanafis, which was laughing loudly, specifically inside salah. Laughing loudly, specifically inside salah. This was their exception. Yeah. And that's because of a hadith. Yes, the hadiths are weak, but the Hanafis, according to the Hanafis of that time, they believed they were strong enough to actually derive a ruling from. Okay, so now we're going to go into slightly another topic. This isn't to do with Hanafis. This is to do with other things now. Yes, there are other schools, but it's just good to be aware of them. The purpose of to be aware of this, yeah? Okay, number one is touching a woman. So for a male touch a female or a female to touch the man. So both ways, vice versa. Okay, so the Hanafiya, no, we don't agree with any of this stuff. Yeah, so touching the opposite gender, and this is just, I'm talking about just touch. Let's say, you're walking, or let's say you go to a till and the cashier is a woman, she, gives you, money and you accidentally, we're talking about this sort of stuff, yeah? Hanafis, no, nothing like this breaks wudu. But other madhahib, they take all this, yeah? So Hanafis are the only ones that say it doesn't. Generally, the majority of scholars, they say it does. Okay, so that's why we have to be let's just know about this at least. So at least to a, superficial level. So the Maliki and the Hanabila, touching the skin of the opposite gender with pleasure or sexual desire breaks the wudu. Okay. So for them, that's a condition. So it has to be out of pleasure. So it can't be just accidental. So for them, if you go to the cashier and they put a pound in and the skin touches, the wudu does not break. That's not by design. That's just coincidental, accidental sort of thing. Okay, so for them, that's a condition. Malikiya say regardless of who is touched, covered or not, so even on top of the clothes, according to them, it will still break wudu. Yeah. Whether it's the skin, or where you touch the hair, where you touch the nails. Okay, that's what's specifically written in the books of Maliki, in the Maliki books. The Hanbalis, they say it has to be direct touching. So it has to touch the Hanbalis, they say it has to touch the skin. So if you touch on top of the t-shirt or something, it doesn't count. Yeah. So Malikis, they directly touch the skin. Hanbalis, no. It doesn't have to touch the skin, could be on top. Hanbalis, they say has to touch the skin with desire. And the person touched has, it sounds quite weird, doesn't it? The person touched, but the person touched has to be at an age of desirability. So it has to be someone that's at least, according to those days, obviously now it would be different. In those days, they used to define that by the age of 7, 8, 9, that sort of age. And regardless of who is being touched, yeah? If it's a mahram or non-mahram, old or young, it doesn't matter. Okay. So there's a slight difference between the Maliki school here and the Hanbali school here. So Maliki school doesn't have to be the skin directly. Hanbali school has to touch the skin directly. That's generally the major difference. Shafi'is. So merely touching the skin of the opposite gender breaks wudu for both. So they're the strictest in this. That's why for many Shafi'is, it's very hard, especially when you go to like places like the Haram. When you're doing tawaf, imagine. For them you need to have wudu. When you're doing tawaf. So life becomes very difficult. So merely touching the skin of the gender breaks wudu for both. Touching the skin of a non-mahram without barrier will break wudu for both. So touching the skin of a non-mahram without barrier will break wudu for both, even if old man or old woman, and even if by accident, must reach the age of shahwa. Anyway, so basically what we need to take away from the Shafis are the strictest in this, and Hanbalis and Malikis, they put the condition of desire there. But anyway, so we just need to know at least the basics. We don't need to go into detail of this. But the only answer that we truly need to know is Hanafi said no. Yeah? Khalas. Does washing the dead body break wudu? We're going to come to that in a minute, inshallah. Okay, Hanafi evidence, let's just look at some of the evidences, just so you know that the Hanafi view is obviously a lot stronger than the others, even though they're the minority. I think this is sarcasm, by the way, yes? So only Allah knows which one's stronger, and obviously the scholars know which one's stronger, whichever opinion you follow. Okay, the Hanafi dalil. Okay, so here, the verse, the main thing where this comes from is the verse, أَوْلَا مَسْتُمُ النِّسَاء, in Surah An-Nisa. So Allah is describing the things that break wudu. So Allah mentioned going to the toilet, and from them Allah says أَوْلَا مَسْتُمُ النِّسَاء. If you do lumps to a woman, yeah, if you do lumps to a woman, then your wudu breaks. Now, what is the meaning of this word lumps? According to Ibn Abbas, and this is where Hanafis base their view, he explained this as this is not just referring to touching. This is like metaphorical for having actual intercourse with a woman. Yeah. So you're referring to actual intimacy with a woman. Yeah. So it's not just merely touching. So this is where we interpret this word to say this based upon Ibn Abbas. He's an authority. Abdullah ibn Abbas was referred to as the Mufassir. Yeah. So he is an authority in this field. And the others, they take it literally. So they take the word literally. Lumps means to touch. So here it's literally if you touch them, wudu breaks. Yes, this is largely based upon the interpretation of this word. Yeah, but there are others hadiths. So let's just quickly glance at some of the hadiths. So Aisha radiallahu anha said that the Prophet used to kiss one of his wives and then pray without performing ablution, which means what? He must have touched her, isn't it? As you can't do that without touching, and he used to pray. So hence, and this narration in Nasa'i. Generally, the English translation doesn't have the references on it for some reason, but if you look on the Arabic, it says Sunan al-Nasa'i. Oh no, what's the word? Yeah, so generally, if you can't find the reference in English, most likely we'll have it in Arabic. If the Arabic doesn't have it, there's a problem. Okay, so this narration of Nasa'i. Another narration of Nasa'i, the Messenger of Allah used to pray this is Aisha narrates this. Aisha says, the Messenger of Allah used to pray when I was lying in front of him. In those days, the houses and the rooms were small. Lying in front of him as the beer is placed in front of an imam. When he wanted to pray witr, he would nudge me with his foot. So his foot would touch Aisha radiallahu anha in salah. Yeah. And he wouldn't do wudu. So hence, just merely touching a female does not break your wudu. Do you understand, Wasi? Aisha radiallahu reported, basically the similar narration, but this one is Sahih Muslim. Okay. looks like I don't have the evidences of the other schools.
I was going to say, what do the other schools say about the Hanafi evidences?
They'll just say it's weak.
Oh,
No, that'd be the main thing. Because Nasa, by the way, Nasa'i is a book, has many weak narrations inside it. That's one thing. Is so number one is they go with the Quran verse because to mean actual intercourse, and number two is the most I just say the Hanafi evidences are weak. These hadiths are weak. Yeah, because obviously majority have taken the view that touching a woman breaks the wudu. But anyway, so at least there's some basic details. Okay, number two is touching the private parts. Okay, the Hanafiya. So again, that's all we need to know. Doesn't break wudu. Yeah, you can. There's no restrictions there. Yeah, if anyone wants to do anything. Yeah, so Hanafis touching the private parts does not break wudu. Majority. And by the way, if this is the first time in like a fiqh classroom setting, discussing these things are completely normal. We can't learn our deen without discussing them. Imagine, let's say, even Aisha radiallahu anha, she would discuss these topics to all the men of the Sahaba. So imagine a young woman discussing, how the Prophet ﷺ was in his intimate life, and should be very graphic and very detailed because this is a part of our deen. And none of our deen should be hidden. As soon as you hide deen, then the ilm is lost. When the ilm is lost, then part of deen is lost. Yeah. So in fiqh settings, by the way, this is very normal to discuss all these issues in depth. And it's not just because we want to, it's because it's necessary part of our deen. So shyness is of two types. One is shyness that takes you away from Islam, and one is shyness, which is a natural shyness, which we should have. But our shyness shouldn't be such that it actually takes us away from Islam and we deprive ourselves of learning. Yeah. Okay, but anyway, so Hanafis, it doesn't break wudu. Majority, again, it says touching the private parts breaks the wudu. Okay, so let's see why. Okay, so obviously we're going to start with the Hanafis. The reference for the first hadith is in there, but as far as I remember, this was Darul-ilm. So Qais ibn Talq, he says, I was sitting with the Messenger of Allah and a man asked, I touched my private parts, or if a man touches the private parts in Salah, is it necessary for him to perform wudu? He said, no, it is only a part of you. It's just a part of your body, then why should that break wudu, basically? Yeah, this is a hadith. Again, in Musannaf ibn Abi Shayba, Ali was asked regarding a man who touches the private parts. He said, no, you don't need to do wudu. And Sa'id ibn Jubair, he narrates that he asked regarding, most likely asked Ali touching the private parts in Salah. And he said, it does not matter whether you touch it or your nose, basically. Same thing. Yeah, it's a nice way of putting it. Okay, so basically the Hanafis, they take these narrations and say that it doesn't break your wudu. Okay, but the majority, they say it breaks your wudu. Why? So Shafi'is, a person. Okay, so now basically there are hadiths that suggest. So it looks like I haven't brought all the hadiths here, but basically there are hadiths that say if you touch your private parts, then you need to do wudu. There are explicit hadith. The Prophet said that if you touch your private parts, you must do wudu. Okay. But one response given to that is, what does wudu literally mean? I think we'll come across this in one lesson. What's the literal meaning of wudu? Nope. Before Islam came, they used the wudu in one sense. Salman al-Farisi had something to do with it as well. Yes, one of the literal means of wudu is to wash your hands. Yeah. Is literally wash your hands. So when the Prophet said, when you touch your private parts, do wudu, we interpret it as he meant just wash your hands. Like, why do you need to, wash your face and your arms? And, that's how Hanafis interpret these hadiths. But they don't interpret it like that. They say, no, this is a Shari perspective. The Prophet is referring to full wudu. Okay. But now when you say touch, what does it mean? What if you touch? Now this is where the legal things come in now. So let's look at this. And the reason I'm going into this, just so you can understand how jurists work. Yeah. So Shafi'is, a person touching so this refers to the front or back, male and females, old or young. Yeah, so that's the first thing. So the hadith is general, so we generalize the ruling. Number two. Okay, now this is interesting. This is the interesting part. Must touch with the palm, so the inside of the hand. Yeah. So if you touch with basically the back of the hand, they say it doesn't break wudu. Why? Yeah, because the Prophet said touching, and what's the instrument of touching? It's Generally, it's when I say I'm going to touch something, I'm going to touch it like this. Yeah. So why wood in the back of the hand? Because you extend, this is analogy here. So when something is, when a ruling goes against logic, you cannot use analogy to extend that ruling. So I'm going to repeat that again. When a ruling in Islam goes against logic, you cannot extend that ruling onto something else. Yeah. So now here, this ruling goes against logic. Yeah. So now you have to restrict it exactly to what the messenger said. So he said touching, generally what do you touch with? With the front of your hand. Let's say if you touch with the elbow. Let's say if you touch with something else, let's say your thigh. Yeah. That happens all the time, isn't it? Will that break the wudu? Technically you are touching it. Yeah. That will not break your wudu. Yeah. So now they restricted, it has to be with the palm, the inside of the hand. And back of the hand will not basically break. Only directly with the inside palm. Back of the hand is not the instrument of touching, so resembles the thigh for them. See how jurists work? Yeah. Hanabila, a person touching the front or back private parts, male or female, breaks wudu, old or young, any part of the hand. So they don't restrict it. Yeah. And they have the hadith where Busr ibn Safwan narrates that the Prophet said, if any one of you extends their hands to their private parts, they should perform wudu. So for them, the hadith is general, extending your hand. So here it refers to the whole hand. Yeah. So it depends on how you basically do. So this is all definitive or speculative? It's all speculative, isn't it? So that's why there'll be so many diverse opinions, and they're all entitled to the opinions. Just depends on how your juristic mind works, isn't it? That's basically what's going to happen. And the word farj here just means private parts. So that can refer to male or female. So that's why the wording keeps it open. So anything that the messenger makes general, we will make it general. Anything that he restricts, we will also restricts. Just 1 or 2 slides and we're done, inshallah. Okay, laughing loud in salah. This is only according to the Hanafis. And the reason why, basically, there's some narrations that say that basically while the companions were praying, there was a blind man in front of them. He was walking. And because he was blind, he didn't see the ditch or something in front of him and he fell inside. And the Sahaba, they saw this and they started laughing. But in the beginning days of Islam, you could actually talk in Salah, it wasn't a problem. Talking was very prohibited later in the later Medina period, by the way. Talking was permitted, looking around was permitted. So you can have a casual conversation with the person next to you in Salah and completely fine. Yeah, it's like a catch-up session. But laughing was not something that was, people had done before. So this was the first time someone actually laughed loudly in Salah, because when you're laughing, it's disturbing even the Imam, isn't it? Yeah, so they laughed loudly. And then the Prophet, he said, I think he must have become angry and said, who laughed in Salah? And when they said, it was us, at least they owned up, yeah. Today, no one's going to own up, isn't it? Yeah, so they said it was us. And the Prophet commanded them, he said, go and do wudu and repeat your Salah. Okay, so now the fact that he's telling them to do, he wouldn't tell them to do something if they didn't already have it. It's like telling someone wear a jumper, but he's already wearing a jumper. Yeah, so the jurists, they take from this that, their wudu must have broken. Some jurists do say that, he made them do wudu as a punishment, not because it broke. That's a valid opinion as well, isn't it? Yeah. But generally the Hanafi stance is a way of precaution. And generally in worship, you should try to be precautious as possible. So that's why they say that your wudu breaks. But again, and you have to repeat wudu. And the same rule applies. What rule did I say before? Anything that defies logic, you cannot extend it using an analogy. So now this ruling stays exactly as it is. The people praying Salah, they were men, they were baligh, yeah, they were adults. That's why this does not apply to children. If children laugh in Salah, we don't say that the wudu breaks, because now you're extending the ruling from men to children. This was a Salah that had ruku and sujood inside it. Which Salah doesn't have ruku and sujood inside it? Janazah. So if someone laughs in Janazah Salah, I don't know why someone would. Maybe you're happy. Yeah, finally gone. But if you laugh in Janazah Salah, we say that the wudu will not break, because we don't want to extend the ruling which defies logic. Eating camel meat. Wasim. This is a ruling only found in the Hanbali school. Yeah, which is, you can tell this is a very weak opinion. Yeah, so only the Hanbali schools, out of all the schools in the world, only the Hanbali schools have somehow adopted this opinion. Yeah, so they till today, for a strange reason, which I will never understand. Maybe Wasim can shed some light on this. They say that eating camel meat breaks wudu, breaks your wudu. Yeah, and then we have the clear hadith in Sunan Abu Dawud, as the Prophet said, the last practice of the Messenger of Allah was that he did not perform ablution after taking anything that was cooked with the help of fire. Yeah, because there's one hadith Abu Hurairah narrated, I think I mentioned before. He said that if you consume something that the fire has touched, then you must do wudu. If you consume something fire has touched, then you must do wudu. Basically, if you consume something that's cooked or boiled or whatnot, then one Sahabi asked him, Abu Hurairah, what if you do wudu with boiled water or with heated water? Do you need to do wudu from that wudu? And then the Sahabi, there's a conversation between companions, and the Sahabi rejected his narration. What are you talking about? Yeah, but Wasim knows what's been talked about. Yeah. Anyway, if you want any clarification, don't come to me. Come to Wasim.
I think he's eating camel meat. No,
I'm joking, Wasim. Before he leaves the course. Okay, that's it. Okay. Oh, I didn't. Oh, there was no slide. According to the Hanbali school, I think it's according to the Hanbali school, isn't it? If you bathe a deceased, then your wudu breaks. But that's only according to the Hanbali school, not according to the Hanafi school. So there is a hadith that the Prophet said, if you bathe the deceased, then do ghusl. But here's like, why does bathing a deceased make ghusl obligatory upon me? So here we say the Prophet said it by way of recommendation. Just if you're bathing a disease, you'd want to wash yourself afterwards, isn't it? It's just, but that doesn't make me spiritually impure. Yeah. So that's why, we say it's not referring to a command, it's referring to a recommendation. But anyway, so yes, we've covered the obligatory the things that break wudu, which hopefully, we had a few other things to do. Who needs to go? Whoever needs to go, it's not a problem. You can just catch up. I'm just thinking if some people can stay, even if it's 10 minutes. Basically, we've got a question and answer session, and you can just listen to it later anyway. It doesn't really make a difference. And the sisters, anyone need to go right now? Or should we just end the lesson and continue next week? It's just question and answers on what breaks wudu. Should we continue next week then? All right. Okay, let me just see. 1 second, everyone. Okay, so just do this for a couple of minutes, then we'll end. Okay, so the first 12 questions we've already done this. So 13. So, okay, some things that we haven't discussed before, some things we would have discussed. Okay, someone has pain in their eyes, and then some moisture is coming out of their eyes. Someone has told me this before, and someone gave them a complete wrong answer, which would have ruined their life. So what's the answer to this? So someone has pain in their eyes, and due to that, the tears are constantly coming out of the eyes. What's the ruling? Would that break their wudu?
No.
Why not?
Because it would be pure. If it's tears coming out, then it's not impurity that's flowing off your eyes. Even if there's pain, it's not it's not impurity.
Okay, it's not an impurity. Okay, but this does have a slightly different scenario. If there's a wound inside the eye, and from the wound, tears are coming, but mixed with something else from the wound as well, then in that scenario, the wudu will break. And that could happen. Some people have an operation, and I was reading about this. So it can happen, but naturally, that won't be the case. Normally, if someone's just tears are coming out, then the wudu does not break. But if it's specifically coming out from a wound, let's say you had an operation or something, then in that case, the wudu will break only. Will water coming out of a pimple break wudu?
Yes. No.
Yes.
No.
Remember the two principles, always relate it back to the two principles. That's all you need to know.
But it's-
There's
If
no
it's
blood.
water, if it's pus, then it's probably, but if it's just water, I don't know if it's just the water.
It's just water.
You won't get like proper H2O coming out. Yeah, so it won't be like water is it's like a watery substance. So it's not H2O. Yeah. So does that break wudu? Okay, so blood, pus, and any other watery substance that comes out, so they all have the same ruling as blood.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, then it would be there.
Yeah.
Then it would be.
Still says breaks wudu. Sisters, breaks wudu.
Yeah.
And online guys, I want you to write on the chat, yeah? So everyone just write your answer so I know that you're still here as well. Okay, whoever said no, the answer is wrong. Whoever said yes, the answer is wrong. Why?
What's wrong?
Remember the principle, impurity flowing out of the body. The key is flowing. Yeah, if it just comes out a small amount, doesn't break wudu. Yeah,
Oh.
it has to
right,
flow.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So if you just tell someone, yes, it breaks, you're giving them the wrong answer. What if it didn't flow? Remember in Fiqh, can you assume anything? No. Yeah. So you may be projecting what's in your mind onto them, and that's not the real life scenario. Yeah. So yeah, that's why the two principles are key. So in Fiqh, you have to know your principles very, very well. Yeah. And you can't assume anything. So if it flows out of the body, only then it will break. If someone pricks themselves to test their blood sugar level, does that break the wudu?
Does it flow?
Because it has to flow onto the.
Does it flow? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what you'd have to ask, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah. So if the blood is flowing,
Then
Yeah.
it breaks it.
yeah. Or the other rule here is what you need to know when it comes to flowing blood is if that amount of blood comes out, which has the potential to flow. Yeah. So if that amount of blood comes out that has the potential to flow, then that breaks wudu. Sometimes what happens, especially when it comes to diabetes injections, they prick themselves and there's like a big bubble of
Yeah.
blood
Oh,
over
yeah.
here. So technically it hasn't flowed, but there's like a big bubble of blood. Yeah.
But then when they use the machine, it goes inside by whatever it is. So then it's flowing into the.
Yeah. So as soon as enough blood comes out that had the potential to flow, that breaks wudu. Yeah. So if at that moment I did that, then it will start dripping down, isn't it? Yeah.
So if anything drips, does that count as flowing?
Yeah, if it's already dripped, then yeah, that's flowing. And even if it hasn't dripped, but had the potential to drip, then broken. That's what you have to remember. Anything that has a potential to flow breaks wudu. Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't flow. Let's say you take an injection, like you draw blood. So it doesn't flow into the body, you go straight direct into the needle. That has the potential to flow, isn't it? Yeah, so having the potential to flow is the key thing you need to remember. Potential to flow. Number 15, if someone pricks, 16, does wudu break by uncovering the aura? Aura is like these parts that need to be covered. Does that break, everyone? No. Okay, number 17, does breastfeeding break wudu?
No.
No, good. No, because is that an impurity coming out? No, it's not an impurity. So a lot, I've had this before. Someone asked me, does it break wudu? No, it's not an impurity. Go back to the two principles. Yeah. So whenever you want to answer something in fiqh, you always go back to the principles. Yeah. Okay, this was a memory question from what we've done before. When does sleeping break wudu?
When it's a deep sleep or you lose your senses.
Okay, when it's a deep sleep, what's categorized as a deep sleep?
If you're leaning on something and if you were to remove that, then you fall.
Okay, if you're leaning on something, that's the one scenario. If you're leaning on something and hypothetically, if someone was to remove it, you'd fall and then wake up. That's a deep sleep. What if you're not leaning on anything? Does that break wudu? Okay, so when you're not leaning on something, it does not break wudu. But if you just say no, that's the wrong answer.
If your bottom is firmly on the ground.
Yes. Yeah. So if your bottom is firmly on the ground, then your wudu does not break. Yeah, as long as you're not leaning. So here the condition is your bottom being firmly on the ground. But if it's not and you're asleep, then that'll break your wudu. Deep sleep. Okay, number 19. When does sleeping in sajda break wudu? Okay, does sleeping in salah break wudu? But if you're in a deep sleep, wouldn't you just fall over?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so you still have control of your body, isn't it? The fact that you haven't fallen over. Yeah, so in salah, if you sleep in salah, does not break wudu, but there is one situation that can break wudu in salah. So this is the situation when how basically in the Hanafi school, the women, they do sajda different to the men, isn't it? Generally in other schools as well. The women, they put their on the ground a lot more than the men. Yeah, I'm not sure if you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so if women do sajda in that position, then the jurists rule that it will break. Yeah, but if you do sajda according to generally how the men do sajda, then the wudu will not break. Do injections break wudu?
Go back to that point again.
Depends. If the injection comes out and it starts flowing blood, then that will break wudu.
Yeah, so you can't just say no to any of these. Yeah, you can't say yes, you can't say no. So if enough blood comes out that has the potential to flow, then yes. Yeah, so you can't assume anything in the scenario. Okay, 4 more questions. Must the person use water after? Okay, that's not. Okay, must the person use water after relieving themselves? Do you think it must?
Yes and no, because isn't there a ruling for men that if a man was to urinate, he doesn't have to do stinja, but a woman has to?
What rule are we going back to say yes or no?
I don't have one.
Just remember, you can't answer any Fiqh questions without any rules in mind. You need a framework.
I would say that there's nothing explicit to say that one. And as well, it's not only in the time of the Prophet, they wouldn't always have water anyway, and there's rulings on Tayammum as well. So to say that a person must always need water is it's not possible.
Okay. Okay, so to actually answer this question, we actually haven't learned the answer yet. To answer this.
That hadith, the Prophet said, is that the wrong thing? Where she was at a graveyard and something about people who haven't cleaned themselves properly. By something along the lines of that.
That's like splashes of urine.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, so for this, we actually haven't done this yet, but the answer to this is, let's say for your salah to be valid, you can't have impurities in your body, clothes, or place, isn't it? Yeah. But how much impurity is tolerated? Anyone know? Let's say if you have the tiniest needle, that dot of impurities, I mean your salah won't count? No, so how much impurity is actually tolerated?
As long as you can't see it.
That could be loads, and you just don't look at it. Even if you wet yourself, just don't look at it. No, that's not an answer. Anyone else there? Okay, generally the scholars, the rule, it's like a size of 50p coin. In those days, it used to be a dirham. So up to that much is tolerated, the size of a 50p coin. Yeah. So if you have impurity on your clothes or body less than the size of a 50p coin, then your salah is still valid. Yeah. So now when you go to relieve yourself, same rule applies. So if you're going to relieve yourself and the impurity left in your body will exceed the size of 50p coin, then you must wash. You must use water. Yeah, because the impurity can only be removed by a liquid substance. Yeah. But if you're going to relieve yourself and there's not going to be impurities left the size of 50p coin in your body, then it's fine, you don't need to use water. Yeah. And that applies to literally doing the number 1 and doing the number 2. Yeah. So especially the Arabs, in terms of the food that they would eat, to be like very dry food. So when they used to go to a toilet and do number 2, their feces basically be very dry kind of thing. So that's why they didn't really need water as such. And even if they didn't need water, there wouldn't be much impurity left. Just wiping would be enough. Yes, that depends on your diet as well and the circumstances. Obviously, recommended to use water anyway. I'm not saying don't use water, everyone. Yeah, I'm just saying in that scenario, they could still pray salah. Yeah, if the impurity does not exceed the area for more than the size of 50p coin. But if it does, then it has to be washed. Does that make sense, everyone? And number 22, does smoking break wudu? Everyone? No. Does swearing break wudu?
No.
And does changing clothes break wudu? No. Okay. Let's see any other. Wasim, what are you trying to smell? You're trying to smell the impurities. Okay, any other questions to do with the breaking wudu before we finish? Yeah.
What's that? When the ruling goes against logic.
You can't extend the ruling onto something else. Okay, and just to clarify where the 50p rule comes from, yeah. So the way that, like, strange why the 50p out of all things, like who made that 50p rule up? It's actually by a scholar named Ibrahim al-Nakhai in Iraq. Yeah. So he said, okay, so let's say when a person does a number 2, goes to the toilet, yeah. And so I'm going to be a bit graphic here, yeah. So let's say when you do a number 2, so you have the anus, yeah, let's call it that's what it's called, the anus, yeah, and the impurity comes out, yeah. So now if the impurity is just on the anus, which is natural, isn't it? And the Sahaba, they would, you do number 2, and without washing themselves, they do wudu and pray salah, isn't it? Yeah. So that must mean there must be at least some impurity left on the anus, isn't it? So that's the impurity. That amount of impurity is what's tolerated. And how big is that part? You defined it as the size of 50p coin. In those days, it's 1 dirham, yeah. That's equivalent to a 50p coin. So he said it's the size of a dirham that's tolerated. So now doing analogy, qiyas on that, he said, okay, if since that much is tolerated, that means if you have impurities on anywhere else on your body to the size of that 50p coin, that will also be, that's the amount that will be tolerated in Sharia. So even if say blood goes in your clothes and it's less than the size of 50p coin, or urine goes in your clothes less than the size of 50p coin, then that's also tolerated based upon this analogy. Yeah, because there's nothing explicit mentioned from the Prophet ﷺ regarding this. That's why we have to use analogy to try and come to the right conclusion.
Is that like 50p for everywhere, for the whole body, or is it like 50p? So for example, say somebody went to the bathroom and they had impurity left, like inside of them, and then they also had it on their clothes as well. But 250p, so yeah, 250p.
Okay.
That.
Yeah, so now when it comes to, in terms of regarding salah, you actually, it's defined as how much impurity are you carrying on you. So you're carrying impurity more than the size of 50p coin now, isn't it? So then that will invalidate your salah. Yeah, so that's how it's looked at. How much are you carrying on you, regardless of whether it's on the, even if it's on the, actually prayer mat slightly different, but let's say in your body and your clothes, it's about how much you're carrying in total. And if it's not directly the size of 50p coin, if it even is scattered, you assume if it was to be put together, how big would it be? But anyway, we'll finish there, inshallah. I'll see everyone next week. That's all the online guys. Next week as well, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.